A millionaire CEO stood frozen in the hallway of his own mansion, staring at the baby he had paid his young secretary to have. For a year, he believed he controlled every part of the arrangement, the money, the contract, the future. But on this quiet night, something about the child stunned him so deeply that his breath slipped away. The tiny gesture, the familiar look, the unexpected truth hiding in those small eyes shook him in a way wealth never prepared him for. And before he could speak, a voice behind him whispered something that changed everything. Ethan Cole was known everywhere as a millionaire CEO who lived in a world of shining towers and silent halls. People said he had everything: power, respect, and a fortune large enough to buy anything he wanted. But inside his mansion, behind the grand walls and polished floors, Ethan carried a loneliness he never spoke about. His marriage had failed. His family line had ended with heartbreak. And every night he returned to a house that echoed with nothing but his own footsteps. Claire Reeves entered his life as a secretary who worked quietly, never drawing attention to herself. She arrived early, stayed late, and carried a gentle strength that stood out in an office filled with cold ambition. She lived far from Ethan's world, in a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. The pipes rattled, the rent rose every year, and her kitchen table had one uneven leg. Still, she faced each day with soft determination. Her hardships were many. Her mother's medical bills had drained every dollar she saved. She worked extra hours, skipped meals, and hid her tiredness behind polite smiles. Ethan noticed it one evening when he found her alone in the office, holding a letter with trembling hands. It was a medical notice. Her mother needed more treatment. Treatment Claire could not afford. That night, Ethan made an offer that shocked them both. He asked her to have a baby for him. Not for love, not for family, for legacy, for control, for the chance to rewrite a future he believed power had denied him. The arrangement was strict, private, and wrapped in heavy contracts. Claire hesitated, but she saw no other way to protect her mother. She agreed, trading her own peace for her family's survival. Marcus Hale, Ethan's longtime driver and one of the few people who saw the man behind the title, sensed the storm coming. He warned Ethan that life did not bend as easily as money. But Ethan believed he had covered every risk. He trusted his rules, his lawyers, his wealth. As months passed, Claire moved through her pregnancy with quiet resolve. Ethan appeared distant, keeping emotions locked away. Yet sometimes, when he found her resting in the company lounge or rubbing her back as she walked slowly down the hallway, something unsettled him, a feeling he could not name. Whispers began to circle at the office. Rebecca Lang, Ethan's ex-wife, noticed his unusual behavior during a board meeting. She watched him disappear during breaks, checked his calls, and studied every change in his routine. Her instincts sharpened. She knew Ethan too well not to sense a secret. Claire gave birth quietly, far from the public eye. Ethan believed everything was under control. A perfect plan, a perfect future. But one night, when the child was almost a year old, Ethan walked into a room and saw something that stopped his heart cold. Something no contract could explain. Something no amount of money could hide. And that was the moment he realized his carefully built world was about to break wide open. The morning after Ethan saw the child's startling gesture, he arrived at his corporate tower earlier than usual. The building's glass walls reflected his unsettled thoughts. For the first time in years, the millionaire CEO felt something stronger than discipline. He felt fear. He tried to bury it behind spreadsheets and board memos, But the image of the baby tugging at his sleeve the night before wouldn't leave him. It was the way the child looked at him, as if recognizing something Ethan had never shown. Claire entered his office quietly, with a stack of reports. Her face looked tired, but warm. She had adapted to motherhood with a quiet courage that surprised everyone, especially Ethan. He watched her for a moment, noticing how carefully she placed the files, how she rubbed her wrist as though strained from carrying the baby too long. For a second, guilt pressed against his ribs. This arrangement had been meant to solve his life, not burden hers. He looked away quickly. "Everything all right?" she asked softly. He hesitated longer than he meant to. "Yes," he lied. "Just a long night." She nodded, but her eyes lingered on him, sensing something had shifted. Over the next week, Ethan began showing up at the small townhouse where the child stayed. He told himself he needed to make sure the arrangement was still clean, still safe, still under control. But the truth was harder to swallow. When he stepped into the modest living room, where toys were scattered across a second-hand rug and sunlight filtered through thin curtains, he felt a quiet warmth he couldn't find in his mansion. One afternoon, Claire handed the baby to him. Ethan stiffened, unsure, but the child reached toward him with absolute trust. Something inside him cracked, just a little. Marcus, standing by the doorway, saw it clearly. It was the first time Ethan held the child without thinking about legacy or responsibility. He held the child like a father. It scared him. During a routine wellness check at a downtown clinic, the first shock came. The doctor paused, studying the baby's chart. Her brows pinched together. "What's wrong?" Claire asked immediately. The doctor hesitated. "Not wrong, just unusual." Ethan felt his pulse jump. "Explain." She pointed to a detail in the child's test results. Something small, but impossible to ignore. A genetic marker. A rare one. One Ethan knew ran in his own bloodline, connected to a family story he never shared with anyone except one person. And that person was long gone. Ethan felt pressure build in his chest. The CEO panicked. Claire watched him closely, fear rising. "What does that mean?" But Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind raced through memories he had buried, secrets he had locked away, promises he had broken. As they walked out of the clinic, Claire stopped him. "Ethan, what aren't you telling me?" His jaw tightened. "Nothing you need to worry about." But the lie tasted different this time. Heavy, bitter. That night, Rebecca Lang appeared at the edge of the parking lot, leaning against her luxury car with crossed arms. She had been following him, waiting, watching the gaps in his tightly managed life. When Ethan saw her, his stomach dropped. "You've been busy," she said coldly, "and I'm very curious why." Ethan froze. Rebecca's eyes shifted toward Claire, who was buckling the baby into the car seat. Then she smiled, sharp, triumphant, dangerous. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'll find out exactly what you're hiding." Before Ethan could reply, she stepped into her car and drove off, leaving a trail of fear behind her. Claire looked at Ethan, uneasy. What does she know? He couldn't answer. Not now. Not yet. But one thing was clear. Rebecca had caught the scent of the truth, and she would not stop until she uncovered the secret Ethan feared most. Rebecca's sudden appearance changed everything. Ethan felt tension in the air at every turn, as if the walls of his carefully controlled world were closing in. In board meetings, he caught her staring at him with a quiet, calculated smile. She knew something, or she was close to knowing it. And Rebecca was the kind of woman who did not chase answers gently. She ripped them out. Marcus began staying close to Claire and the baby, sensing danger that none of them wanted to admit aloud. He drove them to appointments, walked them to the apartment door, even checked the street twice before leaving. Claire noticed his concern and finally asked, "Should I be scared?" Marcus didn't answer right away. His silence said more than words. As the days passed, Ethan started pulling away, not out of coldness, but fear. The genetic marker haunted him. It wasn't just rare, it was tied to a painful piece of his past. Years ago, Ethan had lost a brother to a condition that carried the same trait. It had torn apart their family, left scars he buried under success and wealth. The possibility that this baby carried a link to that forgotten tragedy rattled him in ways he never expected. One evening, Claire found Ethan standing alone in the townhouse living room after she put the baby to sleep. He looked older, tired, and burdened. "You're avoiding the truth," she said softly. Ethan closed his eyes. Some truths break everything. What truth could be worse than uncertainty? He didn't respond. The weight of his silence left Claire feeling cold. Outside the townhouse, Rebecca waited in the shadows of her car, watching the lights inside. She snapped a photo as Ethan stepped out with an expression of panic on his face. She whispered under her breath, "Got you." Claire's next challenge arrived in the form of a formal notice from her landlord. Rent was increasing again, more than she could handle. With her mother's treatment ongoing and a child to care for, she felt the walls closing in on her life as well. The arrangement that once seemed like salvation was now slipping into dangerous territory. She considered going to Ethan for help, but his distance made her hesitate. Something was wrong with him, something deep. She felt he was fighting a ghost she couldn't see. 2 days later, Marcus arrived at Ethan's mansion with urgent news. Rebecca tried to contact Claire, he said. She offered her money to talk. Ethan's chest tightened. What did Claire say? She refused, but Rebecca won't stop. He knew Marcus was right. Rebecca wasn't just guessing anymore. She was digging. That night, Ethan returned to the townhouse unexpectedly. As he approached the door, he heard voices. Claire inside, speaking with someone. He froze. A woman's voice answered, Rebecca. Ethan's heart pounded as he stepped closer, every instinct screaming at him. He reached for the door, and just as he touched the handle, he heard Rebecca say, I know the truth about that baby, and soon Ethan will lose everything. Ethan pushed open the townhouse door without knocking. Rebecca and Claire turned sharply, both startled. The baby's faint cry echoed from the bedroom, tightening the air even more. What are you doing here? Ethan demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. Rebecca stepped forward, confidence radiating from every word. Finishing what you tried to bury. Claire deserves to know the kind of man she made a deal with. Claire's breath trembled. Rebecca, please, just leave. But Rebecca wasn't leaving. He didn't tell you everything, did he? About his family, about what runs in his blood. She tapped the folder in her hand. Medical reports. Traces of a genetic condition, the same one that destroyed his brother's life. Ethan felt the world tilt. You have no right. I have every right, she cut in. You forced this child into the world to fix your legacy. But instead, you might have passed on the same suffering you watched in your own home. Claire stepped back, shaken. Ethan, is it true? Her voice hit him harder than Rebecca's words ever could. He swallowed, unable to hide anymore. Yes, he whispered. I should have told you. I was afraid. Afraid the past would repeat itself. Afraid I'd lose everything again. Claire's eyes filled. Not with anger, but heartbreak. You weren't afraid for the baby. You were afraid for yourself. The truth stung him deeply. He had lived his whole life trying to outrun pain with money, control, and silence. And now everything was falling apart, because he never learned how to face grief honestly. Rebecca moved closer to Claire. You can still walk away, you know. You're not bound to him anymore. Not to this mess. Claire looked down, struggling. Ethan's chest tightened. He felt her slipping, not out of duty, but out of trust. Then, Claire whispered, "This child deserves love, not secrets." Her words pierced straight through him. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of everything he had done, not as a CEO, not as a millionaire, but as a man who had tried to buy what he should have earned with honesty. Before he could respond, Marcus rushed through the door, pale and out of breath. "There's something you all need to hear," he said urgently. "It's about the baby's newest test results. They just called me." Everyone froze. Marcus held a folded paper, his hand shaking. He took a breath, eyes wide with fear. "You're not going to believe what they found." Marcus unfolded the paper with trembling hands. "The new tests, they don't match what everyone thought." His voice struggled to stay steady. "The baby doesn't carry the condition Ethan feared. Not even the marker. The earlier reading was a false warning." Claire gasped, covering her mouth. Ethan felt his knees weaken in relief. For a moment, the world steadied. But Marcus wasn't finished. "There's more," he said. "The test shows something else, something important." He handed the paper to Ethan. "This child is completely healthy and genetically yours." A stunned silence fell over the room. Rebecca stepped back as though slapped. "Impossible," she whispered. "There had to be another donor. Another." "No," Marcus said firmly. "It's Ethan's biological child, no doubt." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. All this time, he had believed the baby was only bound to him by contract and arrangement. But the truth was deeper, realer, and more life-changing than anything he'd prepared for. His heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with something raw and overwhelming. Claire stared at him. "You knew nothing about this?" He shook his head, voice cracking. "I swear, I didn't. I thought I was paying for a chance at a legacy. I didn't know life was giving me something real." Rebecca's face tightened, fury rising. "This changes nothing. Ethan isn't fit to raise a child. He hides the truth, manipulates everyone, buries anything that doesn't suit his perfect image. He'll fail this baby the same way he failed his own family." Ethan stepped toward Claire, his eyes honest in a way she had never seen. "I can't change the mistakes I made, but I can love this child with everything I have. Not because of a contract, not because of legacy, but because he's mine. And because you brought him into this world with more courage than I ever had." Claire's eyes filled. "Then why did you hide so much?" His voice broke. "Because I never learned how to be loved without fear." For the first time since this ordeal began, Claire saw past Ethan's walls. She saw the man who carried scars, not just wealth. Rebecca, shaking with frustration, grabbed her purse. "You think this ends here? You have no idea what's coming. People will find out. They'll tear this apart." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Marcus turned to Ethan. "She's not lying. She won't stop." Ethan exhaled, looking at the sleeping child in the other room. Then, "I'll face whatever comes, but I won't lose him." Claire stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you too." He froze. Her eyes held a truth she had been afraid to reveal. "It's about the night the baby was born." Claire's words hung in the quiet living room like a held breath. Ethan felt his heartbeat slow, unsure if he was ready for another truth. Claire stepped closer. "The night he was born, you came to the hospital before the doctors called you," she said softly. "You were there hours earlier, sitting alone in the hallway. I saw you. You looked terrified, Ethan. Not like a CEO, Not like a millionaire, but like a man who didn't want to lose another chance at family. Ethan blinked, stunned. "You never said anything." "I thought you wanted to keep distance," she said. "But that was the first moment I realized you cared more than you admitted." Even then, silence followed. Warm, fragile, healing. In the days that followed, the tension surrounding them began to shift. Rebecca's threats became noise in the background, a fading storm. Ethan prepared for whatever trouble she tried to stir, but with the truth of the child's paternity revealed and Claire standing beside him, he felt stronger than he had in years. Marcus helped Claire move into a safer home, a small, peaceful place in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't grand, but it was warm. Ethan visited often, not as a man checking on an arrangement, but as a father learning how to cradle his son without fear. Each visit chipped away the loneliness he had carried for so long. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the living room, Claire found him sitting on the floor with the baby, both of them surrounded by toys. Ethan's laughter, soft and real, filled the space. She hadn't heard him laugh like that before. "I never believed wealth could feel empty," he admitted, still watching the child. "But this feels full." Claire smiled gently. "Money builds houses, Ethan, not homes." Those words stayed with him. Weeks later, he made a decision. He stepped down from part of his role at the company. Not the entire empire, but enough to give him time, to be present, to be human, to be a father. For a man who defined himself by power, it was a life-changing choice. Rebecca's attempts to create scandal never gained momentum. The truth stood stronger than her bitterness. The rumor faded, leaving Ethan's world quieter and clearer than before. 1 year passed. The child's first birthday arrived with a small gathering at Claire's new home. No luxury decorations, no grand speeches, just simple kindness. Marcus grilled food on a tiny porch. Claire made a homemade cake that leaned a little to one side. Ethan brought a single gift, a small wooden toy he carved himself after weeks of trying. It wasn't perfect, but he made it with his own hands, something money couldn't buy. When the child reached for the toy with a bright, toothless grin, Ethan felt tears rise. Claire touched his arm. "You did good," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "I just want him to grow up knowing love, not fear." Claire nodded. "Then you're already giving him what matters most." As the evening settled, Ethan stepped outside for a moment, watching the porch light spill onto the grass. For years, he believed legacy came from power, wealth, and reputation. Now he understood the truth. Legacy was a small hand wrapped around his finger. Legacy was kindness chosen instead of control. Legacy was love he hadn't known he was capable of. He returned inside. Claire held the baby, rocking gently. The child reached toward Ethan, eyes bright, trusting. And in that quiet, heart-touching moment, Ethan Cole, millionaire, CEO, and once the loneliest man in his mansion, finally felt whole. The judgment of his life wasn't written in contracts or fortunes. It was here, in this simple home, where love had the final word.